Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford. You know him well, of course. Carl Heneghan joins us now. A very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I mean, look, I remember when I was pregnant, everyone gives you plenty of advice, don't they? But paracetamol was pretty much the only thing you were allowed to take, and only when desperately needed and only in very small doses. And we were told that was pretty much the only medicine that we were told was safe for your unborn child. Now we're being told by, President of the United States, that the man who runs his health department, that it's not safe and it could cause autism in your unborn child. Is there any evidence for that?
So to say also, the US FDA has announced an introduction of a new warning label for the drug paracetamol, citing...
That's the Federal Drug Administration, Food and Drug Administration.
US FDA, they're regulated. But look, this is a great moment to think about the actual evidence. So they reference several large cohort studies, including one called the Nurses' Health Study and the Boston Birth Cohort. First thing is to realise they were published in 2019. So now we're 6 years later, you're like, why is this message coming now? They were both included then in a 2022 systematic review of all the studies, 13 that found a small but weak association in terms of the relationship of paracetamol to things like autism and neurodevelopmental delays. But they also said most of these studies have weaknesses in their design and contain confounders. So they use the word may.
So what does that mean in English?
Well, listen, let me tell you, what it means is we need better, higher quality studies, and that's what exactly happened. In 2024, there was a Swedish study of 2.5 million children published in JAMA that said, we find no association. And one of things they did is do what's called a family sibling analysis. So they looked in the same families and if you use paracetamol in some and in not, then we can compare the two and get rid of any family genetics or environmental factors. And it completely disappeared with that analysis.
And even if there had been an association, as you say, sort of correlation. So, well, I did take paracetamol on this child as autistic, and that child, I didn't have paracetamol when I was pregnant, and that child isn't. But again, correlation or association isn't causation, as in this happened as a result of this.
Yes, so what you're saying is I can associate paracetamol in a very small, remembering where they found it was in those exposures where people were taking much higher doses. Much longer term use. So the question is, what's wrong with these people already? And that is a potential confounder that rules out causation.
That's interesting,
So the big issue here, nothing has changed in the evidence base, yet what's happened here is this has been the politicization of science and evidence. Trump and RFK Jr, I think, are trying to distract, trying to say somehow we have all the answers, when actually the problem here is paracetamol remains the only over-the-counter medicine you can take. The problem in the US is going to be huge because many doctors are going to stop prescribing it.
But the worry here is, of course, when you think, well, it's paracetamol, you just take it if you've got a bit of a headache, maybe a bit of a hangover or something. But actually, we're talking about one of the few drugs women can safely take, not with a risk to their child, for, say, if they have a fever. But actually, there could be risks if they don't take that, or if they take an alternative medication that could be more risky in terms of the damage to their child as well. So again, it's playing the odds.
Yes, I think, look, when it comes to pregnancy and prescribing, it's one of the areas, and I teach this, is I always go and check my formula and check, is it okay to give this drug? What's the advice? Certainly there are alternatives that actually are contraindicated, like aspirin, ibuprofen. They're no-nos. So the problem here is you're right. If you're in pain, but you have a fever, that carries risks. So I think this is I just can't work out what they think they're trying to achieve.
Well, no, indeed. And that's the thing. And it does seem to be very worrying. Wes Streeting, the health secretary here, has basically said, I mean, quite blatantly, he said, I trust doctors over President Trump, frankly, on this. He urged the public to pay no attention to Donald Trump. He said, there's no evidence to link the use of paracetamol by pregnant women to autism in their children, none. And he mentioned that 2024 study in Sweden, and he says, don't take my word for it as a politician, listen to British doctors, British scientists, the NHS. Here's the problem, though. I know we have people like Andrew Wakefield, who was an absolute liar and a grifter. I mean, made up a study to pretend there was a link between MMR and autism. I mean, lost his GMC licence, and quite rightly so. But we've also had in recent years some you know, basically the medical and scientific establishment throwing away their integrity and the trust that many of us had in them. People like me, I'm the daughter of a doctor, for goodness sake. When the chief medical officer and the chief health advisor to the prime minister were on, you know, on those podiums ahead of, you know, COVID lockdowns and told us things, I trusted them, because why wouldn't they be telling me the truth? Now, they changed their tune an awful lot over the period of COVID and lockdowns. We know for a fact that when we were told things like, you know, you should have the vaccine because it will prevent spread. No evidence for that whatsoever. You should wear masks. It will prevent you catching the disease or you giving disease to other people. No evidence for that at all. You know, I've spoken about that many, many times. That children and young people should have COVID jabs. No evidence for that in terms of the, you know, the benefit and the risk. The risk of death, the actual risk of COVID to the general population. They were very dishonest about that as well. Well after knowing where the risks were, which were largely those with health comorbidities, very, very obese, or largely people over the age of 80, let's be honest. Now, I've lost all trust in the medical and scientific establishment as a result of that, because I don't know whether it's Big Pharma talking, whether people are covering their backsides. You and I have spoken about the fat jabs, and they say they're all safe. There's a few, you know, few unpleasant side effects, but otherwise they're safe. I don't believe for a moment that they're safe. I don't believe for a moment we won't have a massive problem with future problems, because I don't trust a single word Big Pharma says, or a lot of the medical establishment anymore. They threw that away for whatever reason, and that's why we're in the mess we're in now, that people don't trust scientists and medics anymore.
So, first thing is to say it's not often I agree with Wes Streeting, but this time I do. And then second is to say it seems to be often I agree with you, Julia, and this time I do. And in doing so, I think the last time I think we were here were about the mid-90s, when people realised there was a crisis in healthcare and people were using opinions, politicisation, and using all sorts of treatments that were detrimental to people's health. I find ourselves 30 years on and we've come back full cycle.
Yeah.
Competing interests, ideology, just round the corner is the next game changer, a magic bullet, and actually there's a crisis here. Now, I think what needs to happen is we should have an independent investigation to a really complex problem, is autism and ADHD. Are there factors that cause this? Well, we know there are some things, like sodium valproate in pregnancy, which has been literally banned, doubles the risk of autism. So there are established environmental or drugs.
But isn't there also the fact that they've given a much broader definition of what autism is, and therefore more people in that category, but also there's far more diagnosis, whereas the actual number and percentage of the population who are being diagnosed with the most severe autism, the ones that would have been diagnosed 30 years ago as well as today, they haven't gone up as a percentage, which shows that it's about it being diagnosed in a different way. Correct. Rather than more people having autism.
So that would form part of this independent investigation, the spectrum of disorders. We've seen this in mental health, where it's an indication creep. You can treat more people. And in mental health, when you see somebody with clinical depression, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, is there anybody in there? It's the same with autism when you see a child who can't speak, literally, compared to spectrum disorders, where you see, my gosh, this person's a leading worldwide personality. So I think this issue of indication creep is huge in where we are. Now, I tell you one thing I saw the other day is a study coming out of Sweden, was the de-diagnosis of people with ADHD from childhood. And why was that? Because they're saying it's limited me. I want to go into places like the armed forces. And they're saying, well, you can't come in if you've got this stuff.
I don't want a label.
Yes, so remember, labels come not just with things that might you think you benefit, they'll come with long-term consequences and harm.
But also you do get the extra hour in each of your exams at GCSE, and an awful lot of parents quite like that. I'm sorry, but that's what's going on for me when I see a lot of the time. So good to talk to you. We could do this for half an hour. Carl Heneghan, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford, thank you very much indeed. Very rare, we're both in agreement with Wes Streeting. Ignore this, but don't take paracetamol unless you really need it.